All right. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for your patience. Running on a bit of Kensington time here. Harmony was having a technical. I just was chatting with James and drinking my beer. So, we're gonna get into this. Hopefully, you've poured your drams. If you didn't catch the order from the email or from the chat, oh, that's the description of the tasting. I'm gonna have to do this again. I will put it in there one more time. And for those of you who are really early and got a tasting order that didn't match tonight's tasting, all I can say is oops. But here you go. There's the order. We're going to start with the Edradour 12 Barbaresco, then the Sauternes, then the Speymalt Macallan 2000, then the Signatory Speyside Macallan. Well, M, it doesn't say Macallan, it's just Speyside M. Edradour 21 Oloroso, Signatory Orkney, Highland Park, in parentheses, 18-year, and then a Ballechin 19-year from Manzanilla Sherry, matured in Manzanilla Sherry. Now, this tasting started out initially. We had some very rich sherried whiskeys, and a port cask that Harmony and or Kurt or all of our collection of people at the store were like, we should do a sherry bombs tasting, and that's originally what we were going to do. But then we realized that all of a sudden we had all these casks arrived and we had enough to do just a casks tasting, so we did that. But fortunately, we got all this stuff mostly from Signatory that is on the darker side of things and is on the sherried side of things. And that's how this tasting came about. And it sold out quickly. So obviously many of you were down with this concept. And it is one of our final tastings of the year. Well, technically it's our final scheduled tasting, except for the whiskey calendar tastings, which we've got tomorrow night and on the 27th. While we're waiting for a handful of stragglers, because there's always stragglers, I want to just quickly highlight some of the tastings coming up, because we've added some, and we're getting photos up too. In fact, many of you might recall have been complaining about Evan and Harmony's bourbon tasting not having a photo. Well, Evan's got one up and a cheese one. When you ask, you receive. So those things are coming up. There's a baller Glenfarclas tasting coming up in January with Deborah Stewart. 268 years, I believe, was the grand total on that one of Glenfarclas, with a footnote. Sorry, 216 years. I'm confusing old and rare tastings. There's Bubbly. There's Holyrood in Calgary. There's Macbeth in Calgary, and we have a virtual version of this coming up too. Our Burns Bash Festival for those in town. We do need to update the rum photo. Apologies for that. But look at these great cheese photos. I asked for photos and I got photos today. This is a interesting one, but Italian wine, Piedmont. Lost in Translation, that's coming up. Waterford, Portuguese wine, lots of cool things. We did promise a Bruichladdich virtual tasting. I know some of you outside of Calgary were feeling the FOMO about our Bruichladdich tasting in November with Fraser. So we've got this coming up. We may have a special guest co-host, but to be confirmed. And then, as I promised, there's a virtual Macbeth. New kids on the block, because why not? We've got Holyrood, we've got the Herrick, a couple of new Rassay casks bottled for Alberta, so a bunch of the newer distilleries. There's a rare and old. That photo will get up tomorrow. And then in January, we're going to drop a handful more tastings. So lots of cool, fun tastings coming down the pipeline in the new year. And they make great gifts. And somehow Evan Eckersley is on this tasting, even though he's at work tonight, which is interesting. So I'm guessing he's streaming this or something from his computer. But criticizing Harmony for her filter on Tony's Apple. Harmony, you're muted. You do need to unmute. You figured it out.
Trump filter, which I think is hilarious.
Hey, and one last quick thing. There's something exciting happening tomorrow you might want to share.
Oh, yeah, sure. Our bourbon from Doc Swenson's is finally going to be arriving.
Is it not bourbon, or is it bourbon?
No, it's bourbon.
Okay, it is bourbon. All right.
It's fully aged, all grown up bourbon.
Nice.
With a significant chunk of rye thrown in, and very excited to be launching the first single cask Doc Swenson in Canada. So cool. Exclusively for Canada. So yeah, it arrives tomorrow.
exciting times indeed. We better get to the lineup here because our friend James is joining us possibly just for the one dram, which is coming up in the lineup, I believe, third. And in before we get to that, we've got a couple of Edradours to get through. The first one is the 12-year Barbaresco from a small batch. This one sold out, was quite popular. I think we sort of underestimated the popularity of this one. Probably because, you've heard it before. We're skeptical about wine casks. They are not the new sherry cask. Sometimes they work really well. Sometimes they don't work well at all. But it's hard to gauge some of these things. We don't get tasting notes. We don't get to see reviews before we order them. We have to kind of order them blind. So I probably went a bit on the low side on this one. But what do we think on the nose, Harmony?
It's nice. There's
Mhm.
tons of pepper, I find, and mushrooms.
I think mushrooms is a good note, like some sauteed mushrooms,
Yeah.
maybe like a nice mushroom risotto with, I don't know, you'd have to have figs or something in there, like something to add a touch of sweetness.
Yeah, there's definitely some plummy notes, like black plums, dark fruit.
Mhm. And the palate is rich, spicy. I mean, that wine character really comes through on the palate.
Yeah.
And that whiskey packs a bit of a punch too at 48.2%. Like it's warm, it's spicy, but it's not rough, it's not over the top. It's quite drinkable.
It is quite nice, yeah. It's not bad.
James, since you're here for a good time but not a long time, did you want to share any thoughts on that too? I mean, you are here.
Yeah, I think when you talk to the people in the lab when they deal with these wine casks, I think one thing that's happened is they kind of just think that the bar has moved in terms of how much of this will accept. And I think the goalposts have moved over time, right?
Mhm.
Like some of these that we would consider doused at one point, we're more forgiving of them now. I don't know
But
if
I
that's good
mean,
or bad.
but do you think also the goalposts have been moved in the sense of they've realized that they can't just take it for granted that if it's dark, people are going to drink it and like it?
Yeah, I mean, I think other things have happened too. Like I think that now they understand that just getting a wet cask like you would with sherry and filling it with spirit is not a good plan when there's tons of volatile acid
Mhm.
in there. Like you have to clean the barrels.
Yeah.
Well, even with sherry, I don't know, like that you won't. I mean, some companies definitely do leave the sherry in the cask and just dump the whiskey in, but a lot of
You
others
wouldn't be talking about any brands that I represent, would you?
no. Whereas I think it's not. I personally don't think that's good practice because you have so much more risk of something going wrong if you're leaving that liquid in there.
Yeah.
I mean, and the reason maybe some people don't understand why there's liquid in there in the first place is it's to keep the cask from spoiling. If you leave a small amount of liquid in there for the journey to Scotland when it gets filled with spirit or whiskey, you don't have to treat the cask. Like that's the main reason why they do it. But I would suggest good practice is always to dump it. It could still be fresh, but don't leave the bloody wine or sherry in there. Dump that out, then fill it. Because I think that's where these whiskeys stray into really winey, weird tannic territory.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a little bit unusual too, in that I would expect a different flavor profile than this.
Mhm.
Like Barbaresco is a wine that doesn't have a lot of pigment. It has a lot of heavy tannin, but assuming that doesn't stay in the barrel, you wouldn't expect a lot of tannin to translate from the wood to the whiskey, but it has a little bit.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah, it's curious.
but it's a wine cask that I'm okay with. I
Yeah.
think they've done a good job, and I
Well,
think
these
this.
Barbaresco casks are 600 liters.
Oh yeah, so
Yep.
like they're basically sherry butt, like good long
Yeah.
term maturation vessel.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it's Slavonian oak, from Croatia.
nice. Well, I think the one thing that we've noticed over the last little while with Edradour is that just generally speaking, the quality of their spirit about 5 to 8 years ago, or the quality of the whiskeys that they were bottling we're starting to get better. And I think a lot of this tracks with when they took over the distillery and then figuring out their own cask regimen and getting that dialed in. And then once they did, I think it's been a bit of gravy since then, because especially their young, big sherry bombs are great. I guess it would beg the question, those like 10-year-old 46% sherry bombs, do they dump those casks? I think next time I see Andrew Symington, I might have to put him up against the wall and ask that question. But they
Get him
don't
a few
taste
beers
wine.
first.
Get a few first, yeah, or a couple of drams. Maybe make sure he's not driving his forklift at that specific moment in time, because he generally doesn't like to talk when he's driving the forklift. Well, let's move on to the Edradour 11-year matured in Sauternes casks. Now, this one I am happy to report, unlike the Barbaresco, I believe we've either still got stock or it's coming back tomorrow. Either way, we've still got some of this, but we can't get more. So once it's gone, it's gone. It's up on the screen here. That's not the right page.
This one smells surprisingly creamy on the nose, like buttery.
Yeah, it's creamy and spicy, which is not surprising. I mean, Sauternes, you're thinking presumably French oak. Although I would also imagine they probably don't want overly active oak, because they don't want that wine to take up too much wood. But kind of honeyed, creamy, some soft fruit tones there. It's interesting in that I don't think most people nosing this blind would immediately say Sauternes. James, you gotta.
Yeah, there is always the chance, I think, that a Sauternes cask actually is like a very, very high quality, like tight grained, fairly decent amount of toast French oak cask. And sometimes they're only getting like 10 to 12 months in there. Like I think that it would be worth, kind of like port casks, like more information would help a lot to make a judgment.
James, if I hear what you're suggesting, I think you're suggesting a trip to Sauternes is in order, or to Bordeaux to visit Sauternes producing wineries. And I don't know, maybe drink Sauternes and eat foie gras. Is that sort of what you're suggesting?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say no.
I mean,
Come out onto your balcony and like the fog's rolling in off the Gironde in the morning.
You just carve off a piece of foie gras and drink a
Maybe
mug
shoot a
full of
duck
Sauternes.
from your patio. Could happen.
It could happen. I want my foie gras to be especially fresh in the morning.
I remember it. This is something else you'll see, I'm sure, in the future. I think that dry white Bordeaux from Sauternes passed the sales of actual Sauternes. So a lot of the Sauternes houses now are making like basically a dry white style, and it's selling better, and it's cheap, relatively speaking.
Well, I mean, I think like a lot of people, I've hit an age where I have to choose between things I like to drink and things I want to eat. And I can't have both. So if I want to drink the things I want to drink, I cannot, or like I couldn't, like let's say I wanted to have Sauternes on the regular. Well, first of all, I probably couldn't afford that. But if I did, I wouldn't be able to eat desserts or like other things. Like you can't have everything. And I think Sauternes is one of those indulgences that just feels so over the top.
Yeah, they don't want to go the same way as sherry. They understand.
Yeah. But again, palate's a little winey. You can see that wine cask character come through. It's a bit honeyed and creamy, like Harmony suggested. Some wine gum notes coming in there. A little bit of spice, but to be honest, I don't know that I would go so far as to suggest this is French oak. Like I don't know, James. Do you know, you're the wine person of the three of us? Do they use French oak for Sauternes, or would they use American?
Yeah, it would be 100%, and it would be fairly tight grained. So the Sauternes is unique too, in that like the ABV tends to be on the low side, like they're usually 12.5 or 13% alcohol.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're trying to just like almost give it like a flash, but you don't want it to absorb too much toast. I sometimes wonder if then when the whiskey goes in, there's like a lot of opportunity for interaction between the spirit and the wood.
Because the wine's not taking that much out of it. So
no, I don't think so.
Yeah. Well, interesting. And I believe a research trip is probably in order at some point here. So, yeah, anyway.
Darn.
Food for thought. What's that?
Said darn.
Yeah. But again, it's interesting. Now, curiously, I did think we had one other whiskey in this lineup, and I think we dropped it from the original lineup because it was selling so quickly and we couldn't get more. So that begged the question, why would we put it into the lineup if we can't get more of it? And we sold out of it, but we did get a few more cases of it, and that's the Edradour 12-year cask strength. So there is a handful of those left in the store, maybe 4, possibly just 3. I know someone on this tasting tonight was in the store today and picked one up, and I was still under the impression we were tasting this tonight, which just goes to show how I operate as far as tastings go. I come up with the ideas, I put them on the web, and then Harmony makes sure they get poured correctly. Evan sends out the link, and I don't think about them again until the night of the tasting. So that's why it was a pleasant surprise or not that Edradour 12 cask strength is not in tonight's lineup. But we do have one thing that's not from Signatory that we held back to put into tonight's lineup, which is the reason why James was kind enough to stick around and wag his chin with us for a little bit, because we've got a Gordon MacPhail Speymalt Macallan here. Now, James, we were chatting about this one beforehand. I think we should perhaps say less and nose and taste it and encourage feedback, and then we could
Yeah,
perhaps
let's peel this onion slowly.
Why is
Well,
this so cheesy?
What can you tell us about this one before we get into it? Like age, ABV.
Yeah, and I'll give you some, I think people always want to know, like, where does this Speymalt come from? Of course, at one point, Macallan single malt was Gordon MacPhail's #1 selling SKU. Richard always tells the story of, when the 1939, when his dad started in the shop, you could pay £1 more for a Macallan 30-year-old 1939 than the house blend 1 more pound for a bottle of 30-year-old Macallan.
Wow.
So they no longer fill. I think the last year was 07, if I'm remembering right. And they're kind of contractually obligated to bottle these at a certain pace.
Oh, really?
So we get offered an equivalent amount to our sales relative to their global sales, which in the last 3 years obviously has gone a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
So we usually, I think this year, this would have been offered to us in 2022, and we got offered 3 casks. So 1 went to BC and 2 went to Alberta.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there might have been a little bit of a sneaky bait and switch that happened with the 2 casks that came to Alberta.
Really? Well, tell us why you think that.
Well, so all of these casks that have come to us have been either first fill or refill sherry hogsheads. I think this is one's first fill, correct?
You know what? To be totally honest with you, all I've got is the ABV and the age. So I'm not entirely sure.
I have a bottle. 1 second.
Oh, Harmony can give us more info. Oh, this might be the one here. Hold on.
Okay.
No, it doesn't say on the. I'm on the old yield whiskey base, and there's no info on there.
They don't send us a lot of information on these. Like, we don't get a tasting note in advance. We don't get a bottle turnout.
When I think of all the things Gordon MacPhail has in their portfolio, this is the one thing they have to try the least to sell. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah, no, to be honest, I think they just want to get most of these casks out of the way and make people forget it exists. And then, like, 50 years from now, sell the remainder of their cask back to Macallan for like $1 bajillion.
Right. So
I don't know that for a fact, but I mean, that's what I would do.
So there is a cheesiness to this. It is quite funky, which is somewhat out of character for said distillery. But especially the sherry, and we could talk about it. I found the bottle image for this one on Whiskey Base, and unfortunately, I can't hide the. Well, I'm just going to close this. It'll hide the score because it's perhaps not the highest rated Speymalt bottling ever, but I mean, the nose is nice. Like the nose is but it's perhaps not so Macallan-esque as most of those Speymalt releases.
Yeah,
You know,
this
go
kind
ahead.
of smells like a Macallan that was aged in one of those cheese puff tins at Costco. Like, it's so cheesy on the front end. It is starting to open up, and you are getting some more fruit now on the nose. But the initial for me is like, oh, they're dusting their cask with Cheetos now. Like,
I've jumped ahead to the palate, and I feel like I just took a big sip of what I was expecting to be whiskey, but it was like cask strength limoncello for a moment.
well, it
There's a
definitely has
little bit of
lemon on the nose.
the only thing that connects it to sherry to me is on the palate. There's a little bit of that like candy cola character, but that's like the only thing that makes me think of sherry.
This is perhaps the wackiest Gordon MacPhail Macallan I've ever had. It's very like root vegetable-y, like turnips and like carrots, like heirloom carrots, and earthy. The sherry, it almost, so I remember a story Mike Miyamoto at Suntory told me a long time ago. He used to be the master blender, I think, at Yamazaki, and he'd worked at Morrison Bowmore. And I think at one point when he was working at Bowmore, he was going to Jerez to visit a sherry bodega. And when they went to the sherry bodega, it was a surprise visit to inspect their casks. They made the bodega crack some of their casks, and they discovered that some of the casks were being seasoned with white vinegar. And this almost tastes like a cask that was seasoned with white vinegar and not with sherry.
Interesting.
I think that you're on the hunt of something here. And I think it's very interesting that in this session, I got offered 2 casks for Alberta that were very different from each other.
Yeah.
My guess is they don't know either.
I mean, it's not terrible, but if I was like looking for a Macallan style whiskey, I could see this might not be exactly what you were looking for.
Well, the obvious follow-up question is, like, if I tasted this blind, I might guess it was like a refill hogshead Glenrothes.
Well, Glenrothes would be a good guess because those
they
can go one of 2 directions, and one of those directions is not good. So
right, like distilled in the heat of the summer.
Yeah.
On just what happened to be a 3-degree day at the distillery.
Put into a sweaty sherry cask that someone burned a sulfur stick in, but it's not sulfured. It's
not
just
sulfured.
No, it's not sulfured.
It's very acidic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's funny because I haven't thought about that story about the casks being seasoned with vinegar, and I'm sure there are places, there are distilleries like to save money that are buying cheaper casks where shady things are happening, and but that's not in G&M's character, right? So like,
No, so my version of the story would be, Andrew, the first thing that I thought is that they accidentally got shipped a cask that wasn't seasoned in vinegar, but maybe was seasoned with Fino sherry.
It tastes more like a Fino.
Yeah, it does.
Could be.
Well, I mean, it
That could
doesn't.
totally
It's
happen.
a sherry cask. It doesn't specify. So
I mean, the more I get into it, the more I'm a bit more forgiving of it.
Well, it does have complexity, and it's rich in the mouth, and it's not like.
I feel like this is going to change a lot.
So James told us the distillery he would have guessed if he was tasting this blind. Harmony, if you were tasting this blind, which distillery would you have thought this would be from?
I have no idea. I'm not good at these things.
I've got one.
Go for it.
Uthrusk.
Yeah.
Or AKA Ukroysk, if you want to just say it how it looks. I've had some really wacky, weird Uthrusk bottlings, and it's a distillery I generally don't have a very high regard of.
Is it true that when you drink Othrusk, your pee smells like asparagus?
Probably, yeah.
I always find Uthrusk has like this very notable like pencil note.
Yeah.
Shaving some lead.
It can be pleasant.
It can, but I have never known anyone to be like, dear God, you need to try this Uthrusk. Like that's a phrase that is yet to come up in my 20 years in the whiskey, 21 years and counting in the whiskey industry. Good Lord, you must try this Othrusk. And I happen to know somebody who's obsessed with Macduff, which is a distillery that also although to in his credit, it's mostly from the 60s and 70s. Yeah, Othrusk is just a distillery that doesn't inspire, frankly, anything.
We're gonna find the best Rust cask
Dude,
in G&M's
if G&M's
warehouse
got a
and
stunning
bottle it as a
Othrusk cask,
KWM.
I am in, because
Have you ever bottled an Othrusk?
I've already bottled a Ben Rinnes when I said I'll never bottle Ben Rinnes because I hate it. And we've found at least one, possibly two Ben Rinnes that were good enough to be bottled. So I've learned to never say never, but I've also learned that by making outrageous statements, sometimes something cool happens. So you never know.
Yeah.
No, Kevin, I should address Kevin saying that he likes it. I think this is a classic example of if this didn't have a Speymalt label on it, people would kind of think it was cool.
Yeah.
But the Speymalt clouds things a little bit. But I got lots of angry messages. I had people that were like, "Oh, right, like this isn't a Speymalt," and then other people tell me they like it more than the normal Speymalts. So hey,
Yeah. I mean, it's great. There's whiskey out there for everybody. And, if everybody liked the same things, then it would be a pretty boring place. But the funny thing was, like, I guess one of the things I really wanted to do in this tasting was to pit a G&M Speymalt against another Macallan. And that's what we're segueing into. And this is the Signatory Macallan, well, Signatory M, Speyside M 18 year. And I think we're going somewhere very different with this one. So I'm
yeah.
gonna pop
Speaking of
up
going
on.
somewhere different, Andrew, I'm gonna go find that Othrusk cask for you. Okay.
All right. Well, James, I appreciate you sticking around for a little bit tonight and shedding a bit of light on some things we didn't know, like Sauternes.
There's
So
another honey barrel of Speymalt coming, I promise.
sweet. Well, and we're gonna have to work on arranging that trip to Sauternes where we shoot a duck, eat foie gras, and
I've
drink.
got contacts. One of my suppliers owns a chateau there, so
Let's do it. Let's
yeah.
do it. All right. Thanks, James.
See you guys.
Yeah. Back to the Signatory Speymalt or Speyside M 18 year. So these are interesting. When we first ordered them, and in fact, I think we passed on them initially the first time they came into market because I didn't really have my radar turned on for them. But even when we ordered them, I guess I just sort of assumed they were going to be finishes, but they're not. These are long-term maturation, or some of them might be finishes, but I think this was a long-term maturation sherry butt of Signatory, bottled at 57.7%. Sure, it's 410, it's not inexpensive, but what does Macallan 18 set us back now, Harmony? Do we have a bottle of that on the shelf?
No.
We did not too long ago.
Yeah, we have
Um,
like $800.
$850.
$850.
Jesus
Yeah.
Christ. It's double the price and then some at 43%.
Yeah.
And this is cast strength. So what do we think of this?
Well, it smells more Macallan. And immediately for me, I had strawberries. Like it reminded me of like that Twizzlers. You open the bag, you get hit with it.
I can see a bit of that. There's some nice chocolate tones in there. The berry fruits, I think, are a good call, but also some like dark fruits like figs and dates. And then there's some bigger spices there. Dave's saying medicinal. Jen is saying the color.
I also got like this little bit of meatiness in there on the nose.
Oh, well, this is very rich, very dry. This is
Very
that really dry, nutty, intense style of sherry. And I think the interesting comparison here is not going to be with the G&M. I think it's actually going to be with the Edradour 21. Because if that's similar to the last time we had one of those 21s and put it in a tasting, that's a really kind of austere, nutty, dry, dark fruit, dark chocolate style. I have to say, I think I like that Macallan quite a bit. Some nice chocolate tones in there, some nice fruit tones in there. Your strawberry note was a good one. Some nice spices. Like, you know, when you have those chocolates, like nice chocolates, and then you get those like surprise little like pop rock candies that just happen to be in there, and like, so you get that little fizzy burst. Have you ever had one of those?
No.
It's been a long time since I had them. I think they were like really in vogue about 10 years ago. Like people were putting pop rocks in everything. Um, Sadly, you don't see them as much anymore. Fad, I suppose.
Hmm. Um, yeah, Chris said like the Brookside chocolates, like the pomegranate ones for me would be a good call. I mean, even the blueberry I could find there. For me, there's like a slight like hint of like salty seafood on here,
Mhm.
and it's not bad. It's
Yeah.
just in there.
I anyway, I kind of like that Speyside, uh, undeclared Speyside 18. Wow, Chris is calling it Dram of the Night without adding the caveat, easily his fourth favorite of the night tonight, which is his usual joke. So I think that's like high praise coming from Chris. Um, I noticed one other thing while I was gazing on that product. There is a sister bottling kind of from Signatory that we have in right now. We've only got one bottle left, and I bring it up, and I think it's of note because
The
uh,
25 year.
yeah,
Yeah.
and reason why I think it's of note is it's got great reviews, and again, the price is high, but this is cast strength 25-year-old Macallan.
Mhm.
But what's the 25 at 43%? Is it like 6,500 now?
Yeah.
Somewhere in that range. Do we have it linked? Oh, we do have it linked. It's out of stock and was 53,
It's
but
gonna
I'm
go up.
pretty sure it's over 6 now because it's been
Yeah.
a while since we had that in stock.
Yeah. That's
Anyway,
crazy.
I
Yeah.
like that I like that Macallan. Let's go on to the Edradour 21.
Got a
Now
beautiful color.
this is a cask finish. This is not a full term maturation. 52.1%, originally filled in ex-bourbon, transferred into Oloroso sherry. But this is the crucial point. It spent the vast majority of its maturation in the Oloroso sherry, not in bourbon. So is it a finish? I guess technically, but
I mean,
all this a
I think
double matured.
it's matured. It has like if it's longer than the first cast, then it's matured.
I think so, but I think it's still sadly technically a finish if we're going to get pedantic, which we don't need to, but we could. Um, so thoughts on this one? It's a little softer.
It's much softer. It's not jumping out on the nose for me as much as the Signatory was.
It's more milk chocolate than dark chocolate. And while I'm on this, I might just show this. I don't know if people notice these things, but we do have some features on our website with a bit more information. And in the case of Edradour, there was a distillery profile that Evan wrote up. And I think these might even be his own photos from when we were there a number of years ago. The little stream running by the distillery that kind of looks like a Smurf village and almost washed the distillery away at one point. A month after Andrew Symington bought it, as a matter of fact, and mere days after his insurance policy kicked in. If that hadn't happened, things could have gone poorly. But here's an interesting other side note about Edradour. The name translates in Scots Gaelic to the place where waters meet. So I don't know, when your place name is the place where waters meet, I'd say there's a good chance you might get a flood every once in a while. Kind of like High River, Alberta. There's a pretty good reason why they call it High River. Just
Yeah.
saying. I haven't tasted it yet. Have you tasted it? What's the
Yeah,
palate?
it's very chocolatey. Like
Hmm.
it reminds me of like Easter chocolates.
Yeah. Oh, and there's
Either.
some nice syrupy tones in there too, like maple syrup. It
Mm.
actually reminds me of like a nice sort of off sweet sherry, maybe not quite a PX, but I don't know, something a little less sweet, a bit more dry, but with just a trace of sweetness in there. Some nice nutty tones.
There's a nice
Yeah.
like zesty orange peel in there too.
Like bow and elbow, that's right, Dave, except much smaller and on the side of a mountain, sort of. We'd call it a hill, but they call it a mountain there. It's rich. I don't know if this is the same cask we had earlier in the year,
I don't
but I
think so.
don't think so. Like this is much softer. It's got a nice balance to it.
Mhm.
What's the ABV? 52.1. It's a good drinking strength. I might like that better than the Macallan.
I definitely do personally.
I am. What it
Yeah.
put. Well, interesting again. All right. Now we're on to something that I think was a bit more of a crowd pleaser, especially with my staff. In fact, I think a couple of them bought a few of the final bottles we had of it. It is currently out of stock, but we are expecting another bottling of this in about 3 to 4 months. Now, the interesting thing is that Signatory seems to have fairly healthy parcels of certain things, like this 18-year-old Speyside M, and this one, which is an Orkney, also undeclared. I mean, and these whiskeys to me always raise questions. Like, why is it that Macallan and Highland Park keep getting more expensive, but more and more of these undeclared batches of stuff keep ending up in the hands of independent bottlers at much better prices? And I'll let you read into that what you will. I think my opinion should be somewhat self-evident that they're trying to dispose of things they can't sell at the outrageous inflated prices they've created. But what do we think of this? This is cask strength, 55.8%, matured 18 years in a first fill sherry bud.
Oh, it's good.
Does not disappoint.
No.
Some nice honey, chocolate, a little soft hit of peat in there. Some nice like citrus tones, but also moving into some of those like candied fruit, Christmas cake notes.
The palate is so big and it hits you in like at like waves.
Oh,
And the ABV feels super high, but it's good. Like it
ABV.
makes your mouth like
Well,
tingle on your gums, at least for me.
it's warm, but it's not sharp. And like the layers that you're talking about there, and just the mouth feel of that
Hmm.
reminds me of like kind of older school style whiskeys. Like this is quite frankly a lot better than any batch of Highland Park 18 I've had in the last decade. I mean, this was beautiful, big, rich. And I know we've talked a lot about Highland Park and how much we like some of those bourbon cask like Orkney and Highland Park independent bottlings we have.
Hmm.
Like this is one of the best bottlings of Highland Park I've had in a long time. I mean, the only thing that really tops this for me is that Gordon MacPhail, what was a 24-year-old that we had like 3 or 4 times over the last year. Like we kept getting a bit more.
Yeah, it was a happy surprise. This is nice. Like it sets a high standard for the next parcel that comes in
Hmm.
for Highland Park.
Yeah. Like the peat on that is nice. It's really soft. There's these nice honey tones, loads of fruit, and not just those like dried fruits, Christmas cake, but moving into some nice berry tones in there too. Soft spices, and they're a nice sort of salty minerality creeping in with this gentle, clean, ashy smoke. That's that's lovely. And I think in some ways, what did someone say? Bold, less sweet, brandy-ish. It's kind of interesting because it's not as sherried as the last two whiskeys. And in some ways it's better for it. Like it's showing more layers and has a nicer balance because of that.
Hmm.
But I wish this is, I have such fond memories of the old Highland Park 18. Um, which itself has gone up in price. Like, do you remember like what the current, like didn't we just get that in? Isn't it like $300 or something now?
Yeah, it was $318 or something. 330. I don't know. It was outrageous.
345.
Yeah.
345. I remember when that was like $120 and it was like a great whiskey. My brother and I would usually drink one at Christmas. 345 is crazy. You can have
What was the price on this bottle when we had it?
this one's 300 or was 300 at cask strength instead of 43.
Yeah, and it's not trying to sell you some, Viking myth.
No. It's not. I mean, $300 for an 18-year-old whiskey is not always good value, but if the spirit's good, the quality of the whiskey's good, it becomes a bit of a different story. And for the quality of this liquid compared to other Highland Parks you'd get, or undeclared Orkney that you get, like this is a lovely whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
This
Orkney.
is
All right, on to the last one, which is the Ballechin 19-year small batch, what is it, Manzanilla casks. This is another one that I honestly did not really have on my radar, but we got some. I think we managed to get an extra cask or an extra case of this, but this is Edradour's alter ego. It is heavily peated. I find it's a very ashy sort of Highland peat, and 19 years, and it was a marriage of 3 first fill Manzanilla sherry butts. Manzanilla is a style of sherry we don't see very often. I don't remember exactly. Now, Harmony, you did a tasting with Jeff. Do you remember what Manzanilla sherry is?
No, I ended up doing it with Eli, and
Okay.
and then I just had this proud mom moment watching him. He was so nervous to do the tasting originally. He's like, I don't, these whiskey wine tastings, it's all going to be about the whiskey, and I'm just going to be there standing watching. And it was the opposite. It was all about the wine, and everyone had questions about the wine, and I was just like watching him just like kick butt and talk about it, but I did not absorb much of what he said.
Well, the good news is I have Google and I've figured it out very quickly.
Well,
It's
if
similar,
I talk long enough, you can Google anything.
it's similar to Fino. Well, we don't appear to have Jeff Serja here tonight, who is our fact checker.
I know Fino is an accidental sherry, where Manzanilla is on purpose.
Yeah. Well, no, it's Fino. It's a Fino sherry, like a dry white wine or a dry white sherry style. But it's specific to a single place. So that's where it takes its name from. So the sherry itself is reminiscent of notes of almonds and dough. And well, here we are.
Very pale and dry and more acidic than a Fino.
Jerry, it's not mold, it's called floor. There's technical terms for this. I do know that. Floor, it's called floor. Look it up. You know what? Has anyone seen those sherry dipping things they have? They're crazy. And see someone actually pull from it, but no. Chris and Jerry are both wrong. Anyway, Ballechin, heavily peated Edradour. It's named for a small farm distillery from the 1800s that no longer exists. And it's the name they chose to give to their heavily peated version of Edradour. And I have to say, I quite like this on the nose. There's this nice mix of sort of biscuity, ashy malt with honey and leather and a bit of like fruit.
Yeah. I think you said mold so many times. I'm like, oh, there's a hint of mold on here, but I like it.
Floor. It's called floor.
Yeah.
It's floor.
I'm just going to keep saying mold.
I'm going to keep saying floor because it's funny.
Yeah.
Even though Jerry is a doctor, I'm going to correct him. Because he's not a sherry doctor. He's
it's not a distiller.
The space science doctor from the future is how he described himself once, and he identifies as a cat. Which
is why he left his darn box in the middle of the floor for me to trip over.
Jerry, cherry. The palate on this, so much licorice and like clove and fennel. It's
Oh,
very
fennel's good.
spicy. Loads of earthy spice on this.
Blue cheese. Is this Dave?
Blue cheese. I can see a bit of blue cheese, perhaps. Maybe blue cheese with like honeycomb or a honey drizzle on top of it.
Hmm.
That used to be my favorite thing. It was like my Oprah thing. I'd come home, long day, have dinner, then I'd want to have a beer and a little bit of blue cheese with honeycomb on it. And then I realized I couldn't do that every night for the rest of my life, so I stopped.
I was gonna say, is that you choosing between Sauternes and foie gras?
Well, I think it's a less long-term detrimental choice than the other, but still, it was not a sustainable choice for
But if
many
you're
reasons.
doing it with friends in Italy, it's probably okay. Or France, it's probably okay.
Yeah. Or England, because you could get Stilton. You could have blue cheese somewhere in England. Also, I think my wife's like, "Why do you keep buying honeycomb and blue cheese?" And I was like, "Yeah." Anyway,
It's my thing right
I
now.
really enjoyed it for about a 14-month stretch.
Now you won't touch it for a few years.
No, I haven't been able to find a good, reliable supply of honeycomb without making an effort. Like I used to be able to just go to Peasant and take home a brick of honeycomb, and then their supply dried up. So I'm sure if I really wanted to, I could find honeycomb. Alberta's actually the fifth largest supplier of honey in the world. So I mean, there must be honeycomb to be had, but yeah, I don't venture far. So
Yeah.
I'm supposed to get ordered online, but I'm not going to do that either. So anyway, other thoughts on this stinking bishop cheese? Dave says, it, you smell it too. Huh, interesting. Matt saying this feels like a mishmash of Lag 16 and Edradour 12 Caledonia. I just can't get over how honeyed it is. This is so honeyed to me up north.
It's like smoked honey.
Mm.
So
Well, it's
delicious.
tasty. I think Ballechin, and they don't make a lot of it, so that's part of it. Possibly doesn't get as much attention as it maybe deserves, but there's not much of it around. But it's a great spirit. I like it. 19 years. This is without question, I think, the oldest Ballechin I've ever had. So cool. I think maybe I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't make that statement because I actually don't know that I can back that up. Maybe I have had older Ballechin than that, but regardless, it's very good. I quite liked it. Now, Harmony, we've got our speed round coming up, after which we typically have a poll. And Evan did create a poll. Awesome. So I don't have to get you to buy time for me while I create a poll on the fly.
I
Let's
was going
just
to tell everyone to start Googling honeycombs for Andrew, but we don't have to do that now, guys.
yeah.
Thank God.
I've got all the time in the world to find a new supply of honeycomb. In truth, I don't really need honeycomb, though I'll find some at some point. I quite like the nose on this Barbaresco going back.
Oh, it's weird.
Andrew, you make that same assumption start of sentence every tasting. Well, in my defense, there have been several tastings where there was not a poll. And anyway, it's a whole technical thing. And not to shit on Evan, who may or may not still be watching as well. But like
Yeah, be cool.
he's very good at scheduling the tastings, getting the Zoom link created well ahead of time, so Harmony can put it on the box. There's science behind this, and it all works out great when it works out great. But he's also supposed to copy the tasting description into the Zoom thing so that when I go to Facebook live stream it, I don't have to put it in manually. So there's always these little things where I'm like, I haven't. And it's not that I would do things faster or more accurately. It's just when you go to count on it and then it's not there, then you're like, somehow I've got to do this on the fly, which never works out great. But back to that Barbaresco, it reminds me of Raisin Bran on the nose now. And not that shitty knockoff from Post, but I mean the Kellogg's version. Don't be fooled. The boxes look very similar. They're both purple, but the post stuff is utter garbage. It's not worth eating. I had to like compost the last box that I got. Just throw it right away. The Kellogg's one is much better.
Shit. There is something in this that I cannot place.
I thought you were like, shit, I just bought Post Raisin Bran.
No.
I'm gonna have to
If
throw it.
I'm going to buy a cereal, because I just will eat granola. If I buy a cereal, I'm going all out, like sugar style. Like the
Mhm.
last box was Captain Crunch,
Wow.
because I wanted to feel the cuts on the roof of my mouth while I sinfully ate it. But
Harmony, I think the difference is the age gap between us because it's been a long time since I thought, I should get some Captain Crunch. It's just not been on my radar for many years now.
wow, what's Tony was like Count Chocula and like Flintstones. Like I didn't even know that was a cereal. I thought it was a vitamin.
Sure. Amazing. All things that I see but walk past. And then I'm like, well, got to get my Raisin Bran. Make sure
No,
it's the right one.
Honey Nut Cheerios. That's my favorite.
Incidentally, though, back to the what was it? The Captain Crunch. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Back in the day, Shank's Sports Bar in Calgary used to make chicken fingers that they would batter in Captain Crunch, and
Yeah.
shit, those were good.
I worked there.
I was younger and could eat them at that time. I don't think I would order them today if I saw them, but man, those
They don't
Captain
make them anymore.
chicken fingers, next level.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. There's like some like knockoff gummy bear notes on this now. And like
Barbaresco or Sauternes.
Barbaresco. I can't get over it. The nose. It's like
I'm already onto the Sauternes, and it feels like, I don't know, like a dominatrix is punishing my palate with like rough leather.
you're so lucky. Some
I don't
people
know.
pay good money for that.
I don't know that. I'm not sure I would. But I can describe it.
Yeah.
It's very austere to me. The weird thing in all this is, if I were to try these blind, I would have probably thought the second one was the Barbaresco and not the Sauternes, because it just feels very leathery, very tannic.
Yeah, the sweetness of the Sauternes has gone away quite a bit.
S and KWM. Oh yeah. Little golf clap. We'll get the little golf clap out there for that one. Very good, very good. Raisin Bran and S&M, who knew? We're fearless. We wander into directions. We go whichever way the wind takes us. And man,
Find something to do with those leftover face masks.
I'm already onto the Macallan, and man, it's good, but God, it's weird now. It's like going into like agave nectar and I don't know, some sort of like those dipstick kids things, like where you dip the candy into like other candy and then you lick it off the stick. And also like somehow like, I don't know,
Pineapple?
like lemon, like a fruity tropical fruit, like dish
pineapple.
soap.
Like the really like acidic piece of pineapple.
But it's like dish soap. It's like tropical fruit dish soap. And Jolly Ranchers. The fun dips. There is so much interesting, weird stuff going on in the nose on this Speymalt Macallan. Incidentally, if one or more of you want this bottle, we do have one left. I'm pretty sure. Does that jive? I think there's one left in my office that we were holding back. Now, if more than one of you want that bottle, I'll draw names, but just email me.
Fight over it live.
Can
we not do that?
Is that kind of like, is this going to be like Thunderdome or Star Trek?
Thunderdome, I think.
Thunderdome. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is such a wacky Speymalt. I actually like it a lot more now than I did before. But
yeah, I'm really nervous because I bought this not from us because I was not allowed to have one, but I remember liking past versions, and once upon a time, I was packing an order from KWM to go to a customer, and I said in a video, I don't want to go in a box. Let me stay with Harmony. And he let me keep it. And so I felt bad. I shipped him half the bottle and said, let's share it. And he liked it as a gift. And so I was like, you should buy this new one. I will find one for you. I just don't know if it's going to be his style.
It's still very cheesy, but it's surprisingly honeyed. And I don't know, it's like they've now got
It does taste better now.
like aged Gouda with honeycomb and quince paste. I don't know if all those three things go together at once. Probably two of three at most, but that's where it's going now. It's interesting. If I was looking for a sherried Macallan, though, I do say I think I would have been a bit disappointed with this.
Yeah.
But in our defense as a store, we don't get to try these things. We put it in the ballot. Hey, we got a Speymalt Macallan. We know the people want it. We put it in the ballot. We make sure it's fair and people get a chance at it. And we just did you guys a solid by holding one back to put into a tasting. And then it turns out we held two back because I don't know, maybe I thought this tasting would get double the size, but there is a bottle of it left over, is the bottom line. So if you want one, email me. If you don't, that's totally cool. Harmony will buy herself a second.
I said at the beginning of the tasting, I think this will get better as time goes on. Just in the hour we've been here, it's gotten better in the glass. I think if you pour this baby past the shoulder and just let it sit for a little while, I think it's going to showcase more of that classic Macallan that we first anticipated.
For me, it's not even about Macallan. I just think it's a tasty, interesting whiskey. Whereas the first time we went through it, maybe I was being overly hard on it because I had expectations that it was going to be here, but it was like here. Or actually more like over here. But it's gotten better and more interesting as time's worn on. 100% agree.
Yeah.
The speed round is a little slower than usual, but that's fine. Let's move on to the Speyside M. M for Macallan. Let's see what we think here. Loads of espresso, quite cool. And Harmony, we hear every keystroke on
Tony's stupid setup. I hate this. I'm on like two computers, but the mouse has to go all the way across one to get to the other. I hate it. I'm orange. It's terrible. It's not this whiskey is nice though.
I think this is great. I think it's a lovely whiskey. It's sherried, it's spicy. I think this is what you want a Macallan 18 years of age to be like. And the fact that it's cast strength, it's a nice balling. I still really like that Speymalt, and I'm gonna reach out to James later because I like it a lot more now that it's had time to breathe and I've had time to reflect on it, but that Signatory vintage Speyside M is lovely. No two ways about it. It's elegant. It's a nice classic sherried whiskey. What about the Edradour 21? And it's still Chris's favorite of the night and not referencing in a jocular way the entire range.
It smells like baked desserts, like baked cookies and breads and honeys.
It's like a sort of fancy restaurant brownie, like a brownie dessert, like I don't know, like a Kelsey's, like a chocolate brownie from Kelsey. Is Kelsey's still around? Is that still a thing? I don't know.
I don't know what that is.
It's kind of like a budget Earl's would probably be the best way to describe it.
All I can think of is like Kaylee's, and you're saying it wrong. But obviously it's a different
Called
thing.
Kelsey's.
Yeah.
It's like a step below Montana's, I think, or beside. One or the other. I'm not entirely sure which.
Yeah, it's nice. It's very nice. And we still have some of this left, hey? This is beautiful.
The Edradour 21. Yeah. No, that Edradour 21 is surprisingly good. In fact, I don't know if there's any of that left in the system, but if there is, I'm probably going to grab another case of it because that's drinking really well And dare I say, who cares if it's a finish? It's lovely. It's got some nice layers to it, and showing really well. I can't seem to remember my login to double check. What about the Orkney Harmony? Thoughts on the Orkney?
Yeah, it has this like lovely like tobacco smoke on the nose for me. This nice sweet tobacco. It's still salty and chocolatey.
It is. There's a nice saltiness to it. Nice clean smoke. Honey, chocolate.
There's tons of honey on the palate. And again, this is leaning for me into like nice tropical fruit and like zesty orange.
Yeah. No, this is really starting to go tropical.
Yeah, it's really beautiful.
It's got a nice balance to it. Looks like that Edradour 21 is gone. So whatever we've got is all that's left. To Jerry's comment, surprising they don't release older stuff. I'm assuming you're talking Edradour, or are you talking Orkney from Signatory? Edradour. Well, I think a big part of this again goes back to when they bought the distillery. If my memory is correct, it was either 99 or 2000 that Andrew Symington and Signatory bought Edradour, which means that like their own production, which we're drinking today, would be at most like 22, 23 years of age. So I don't think they have much older stuff. And keep in mind, like until about almost a decade ago, Edradour's production was just 100,000 liters a year. Actually, it wasn't even that. It was 90,000 liters a year. It was the smallest distillery in Scotland until much smaller distilleries opened in the last decade. And, you know, they probably don't have a lot of stuff that's much older than 21, 22 years of age. And that they do have was all made by, I believe it was Chivas in the late 90s, and it's probably not as good a quality. So, to be honest, it's not that surprising that they don't have older whiskeys than that. But Ardbeg, to your point, Jerry, was bought by McDonald and Muir, the owners of Glenmorangie, and I think it was 96, right? 96 or 93, one of those two. So Ardbeg's had longer to get to the point where they can release older whiskeys like their new 25. So yeah, I do think there's some good stuff to come from Edradour. The sad thing is that there's just not as much of it. And even on the independent bottling side, you know, we just got an offer sheet recently, and that offer sheet was a lot thinner than past times. Now, there was still Speyside M and Orkney on it. I don't remember there being 21-year-old Edradour on it, though. There was some Macallan 25, though. Anyone who's in the market for that. Anyway, still drinking really well. What about the Orkney Harmony? Is that where we are? I've lost track.
We're past Orkney now. Manzanilla, to me, it smells like smoked meats. I don't know which one, what meats exactly.
Salami, the finest salamis.
The finest, yeah. It's great. I love the nose on this. I've always been a Ballechin fan. My pick is on a Ballechin at the shop right now. And this just reinforces it for me. But I haven't tried a lot of wine cask finishes that I've liked, but this is definitely...
Maybe a touch of truffle salami.
Yeah, I love it. There's not a lot left in this glass compared to the rest of them, so
the palate on that is great. That's a nice. I mean, I always felt that Ballechin was kind of like Ardbeg, but without a trace of salt and maybe a little bit less medicinal. Like it's a very, very clean smoke on it. Nice citrus tones coming through there. The Manzanilla is a light touch. The floor has added a nice character to the palate. And by floor, I mean not mold.
Right.
To bait Jerry. Fun range so far. I think we got to fire the poll up here. Now, I know for sure that at least one of you has emailed me looking for the Macallan, which is fantastic. So I fired up the poll there where you were able to select your favorites first and second. Now, if you're sharing a feed, I don't know if people think about this, but you could both log in, but maybe one of you without video and audio so that you could do the vote. We'll maybe say there's a little bit of time if you want to figure that out. If you don't, it's fine. But we're going to let the poll run for a minute. Now, Harmony.
Oh, shoot. I got to
What?
pick a favorite?
Well, I was going to actually get you to fill some time before that by
Okay.
asking you, just because people on this chat might be in a situation in the next few days where they have to buy a whiskey for someone as a gift.
Mm.
Now, not specifically to our store, but just in general. Do you have a piece of of advice to give someone who's looking to buy a gift for someone else whiskey?
Yeah, my first bit of advice would be shop at KWM. Uh, we have a great selection of unique whiskeys by unique bottlers that you won't find anywhere else
Okay.
or everywhere else. And our staff are knowledgeable. We also have gift cards if you don't know what the people are looking for. So we also have the ability for you to email Andrew and say, can you have this staff member pick a bottle in this budget for my friend? And we will personally shop for you.
All of
So,
those are good points, but that's not. I mean, these people are already on our chat. I wasn't looking for a shameless.
sorry, not like a
Which,
plug.
by the way, Harmony, well done. I don't know that I could have done that without like cracking up. So well done. No, like I mean, like if you were if let's say they were going to go buy a bottle of scotch for their friend and they didn't know what their friend liked, what would your advice be to them?
Oh shoot, I have follow-up questions. Do they smoke? Do
Oh,
they like sweet candies or dark chocolate? Are they dessert people or savory people? Because these will help. Like if you're a savory person, then like maybe an Ardbeg 10. Maybe that's where you go if you like the savory stuff, or maybe a Highland Park. I don't know
or if you're a space doctor from the future who identifies as a cat, maybe you're really looking for champagne, but your friends think they're coming to buy you whiskey.
Well, maybe if you identify as a cat, you're looking for something with a really nice box that it can go in.
Yeah, and
Box is
or if
really
you're Phil and Suzanne and you're looking to bait Harmony,
the Macallan Harmony releases. They're fantastic and they're named for me. You don't
sure.
even have to put a card on it.
All right. If you had to pick two favorites, or I know we'll let you have three.
I get 3? Okay.
Oh, and while you're thinking, sorry, I'm just gonna give you a second to make sure your decision is right. Jerry, incidentally, there may be a Krug coming in tomorrow that comes with headphones. Just saying that might mean something to you, but Krug with headphones. But anyway, Harmony, your 3 favorites tonight.
So this is weird
Okay.
because it's changed multiple times throughout the tasting, but the Signatory Vintage Orkney 18, I love it. I loved it at the festival when we poured it, and I love it even more now. The Ballechin 19 Manzanilla, I really love. And then honestly, just because of like the uniqueness and how it's evolved, I'm tied for Edradour 11 Sauternes and the Speymalt.
It's an interesting, yeah, no, that's totally fair.
Yeah. It would depend on my mood, I think.
I'm so intrigued, and I know this is probably going to come across offside, but I think we're probably well beyond that with most people on our tastings. That Speymalt Macallan is going into territory now that for me is kind of like, when you smell something that smells bad, but you can't stop smelling it. Like there's something, well, like maybe, I don't know, like I like poo, like a poo smell where you're kind of both disgusted but curious at the same time. This to
You've
me
been
is like,
spending too much time with Walter. Too
no,
much
I
time.
don't. Walter's poos, because he eats raw, are like dry and crisp, and they're
TMI.
easy to deal with. No, but there's something about it that's just they put poo into whale poo. Yeah. There's just, it's like, smell my finger. Like there's just something about this that's just kind of gross but enticing at the same time. It's somehow both. Which is just incredible.
I can
So
see the next commercial for, like, the next advertisement for Speymalt Macallan. Hey, what is this?
Speymalt Macallan. That could be their branding slogan. Speymalt Macallan. Smell my
Smell
finger.
my finger.
No.
Ah,
It's really interesting. It's curious. It's not my favorite though. I
Good.
too am going to go with the Orkney. I think all around that one was the best value, punched above its weight. Number two, I'm going to go Ballechin 19. I just think that's what like a lot of older peated whiskeys should be. And I'm torn between the Speyside M and the Edradour 21, but I'm gonna give it to the Edradour 21 on this because I just think it's showing really well, and it's a hell of a dram. And Kevin's gonna ask for a small my finger recommendation. I mean,
Hey,
wouldn't be the weirdest thing that happened in the store ever. So
I now have come. We have a title for our staff picks tasting virtual.
yeah, yeah.
People who
So
know will know.
oh man, amazing. Some good comments there. All right, let's check on the poll. We'll see where the poll's at here. And see if everyone's had a chance to vote. Almost all of you voted, so I'm going to call it. And it's interesting, but sort of tracks. Here are the results. So, round one, the Signatory Orkney eked out a slight win over the Speyside M. And tied for second, we've got the Edradour 21 and the Ballechin 19. And then round two, Speyside M, Edradour 21, Ballechin 18, and then the G&M Speymalt Macallan. So every whiskey got a vote both times, which is kind of remarkable. That doesn't happen very often. So anyway, cool range tonight. We went to some places we weren't expecting. We talked about poo, which hasn't happened in a KWM tasting in a while that I know of.
There's been no Ardmore in a while. So.
Yeah. There will be though, because we've got an Ardmore cast coming, but that's a different story.
Yeah.
Harmony, any other hot tips about cool stuff we have or stuff that's coming? Stuff you're excited about before we wrap?
I don't know. I get excited about weird little things. Like I'm excited about bourbon, and I know this is not typically the group that gets excited about bourbon, but I am. I mean, if you like finishes, they do an Oloroso finish. We got a bottle of Doc Swinson Oloroso finish bourbon. We got a couple bottles of our single cask tequila left, and then that's gone. And then surprisingly, we found a couple cases of our KWM Glen Scotia in the warehouse that is back on the shelf. So if you missed out on the Glen Scotia and you really, really need to revisit, the Glen Scotia is back until it's lost again.
But there's only like 8 left. So if you're thinking about that one, don't think too long. For sure. Well, this was a fun lineup tonight. It's not quite what I thought it was going to be. The Speymalt is definitely not what I thought it was going to be, but at the same time, I think it's a pleasant surprise. Like it's nice to have things like that you think are going to be a slam dunk and not quite meet your expectations, but in some ways still be very fun. So yeah, I'm grateful for that to have that surprise in there. And I'm also thankful for everybody who took part in tonight's tasting. It was a great lineup. This is the last one of the year other than the Advent calendar tasting. So I want to thank everybody who came out tonight, who tuned in, but also to everybody who's tuned into one of our virtual tastings over the course of the last year. We love doing these. We love having the opportunity to connect with people. And we're grateful that you are willing to do that with us. So thank you. On behalf of everybody at Kensington Wine Market, Merry Christmas, Happy Festivus, wishing everybody a safe, happy, and prosperous new year. And we've got some fun conversations to have in the future and really looking forward to that. But until then, have a great night, everybody. Harmony, thank you. James, thank you for your brief but bright appearance. And everyone will talk soon. Have a great night.